Welcome back to Car Guys fans. This week we have a special guest with us, somebody who created, if you will, a very interesting way of investing. And I actually found them kind of on accident. So I was really excited to have them on. Eden Cooper, thanks for joining us.
Thanks for having me. Pleasure to be here.
Welcome, man.
So Eden, just for the people who don't know, your company is called Drift Capital, right?
Mm-hmm. Yes, sir. Yeah. So we have really a pretty simple goal, which is get more folks involved in the upper echelon of car collecting, right? This has been really an untouchable space for past, call it 30, 40 years, the inception of car collecting. And, unless you were someone who found themselves with a couple $1 billion to spend, you can't properly get exposure to this as an asset class when it comes to really a getting the most out of the asset. Long-winded way of saying you buy the S&P 500, you're diversified across 500 large cap companies located in the United States. There's no mechanism to do that today when it comes to car collecting. Most people can't afford a $1 million car, let alone a fleet of them. So we help and provide access to invest in the very best cars.
So I found you guys kind of by accident, right? I'm a Hagerty member. One of my cars is insured through Hagerty, and so we get the regular newsletter, regular magazine, if you will, right? And there was this big, ad on the back of Hagerty, and had one of my favorite cars on it. And I was like, well, what's this about? And so I ran out to your website to check out what it was about. And tell me if I'm wrong here, but it felt very much like Masterworks, if you're familiar with that, right? Where you can invest in, you get a pool of people together, you can invest in a priceless piece of art. And as the art appreciates, when they go to sell it, you make money on that piece, kind of that way. Is that kind of how Drift Capital works?
In the sense that we are providing, investments in collectibles. Yes, that is similar in that approach. Where I think we differ is we take more of a sort of tried and true private equity spin on things. So almost more akin to private equity real estate. You get access to higher quality assets, professional managers, tax and operating efficiencies, and guidance surrounding the portfolio. Whereas Masterworks and some of these other platforms are more self-directed. Somebody sees, a Van Gogh or a Picasso, and they would like to invest in that specific work. Masterworks' mechanism allows for that. We're more focused on providing a diversified portfolio.
Okay.
That's pretty cool.
Now John's pretty familiar with property, right? Because his wife is in real estate,
right? Yeah. So she buys and she's dealing with most of the time $1 million properties, which has been excellent. but yeah, I mean, in an asset, I guess for us, it would be really tough to look at it and say, okay, so I'm buying this car, but I can't put my hands on it, right? So how does that play out with some of your customers?
Absolutely. So, first and foremost, my passion is all things cars. My first business was actually detailing cars. This was in Houston, Texas. I kind of more fell into, I should say, the profession of money management, and tried to mirror the two, right? The passion and the profession. So that was first and foremost really, on our minds when we set out to create this business, is to satisfy that automotive itch. Because the idea of putting cars away in a garage to collect dust and never be seen from the world is completely against, everything that we stand for, car folks, right? And it takes a little bit of education, right? To share with folks what we're doing on sort of first interactions. People tend to, have sort of a more vitriolic sort of impression. But our goal is to help educate that as well. So the way we kind of solve for that is we have a number of cars in the fund that folks actually can drive. Think of your typical shareholder meeting. We want to put on track days. We want to put on tours, maybe our own Concours d'Elegance events and the like, to kind of continue getting people excited about these cars, inspiring the next generation of enthusiasts and the like. So the cars that are more in the driver's portfolio, or we're less stringent on the sort of investment parameters.
Right.
The ones that are true sort of investment grade, think single owner cars, under 1,000 original miles on the car, pristine, show winning condition. Those are cars that, we really have to keep in immaculate condition and not, disturb, disturb it by actually throwing it on the track. It's just what I
get that.
Those cars will still, bring to events, have people get a look and see, what we're doing, where we're housing them, et cetera. Because it's important for us to kind of have the two things move in tandem.
Currently, what would you say the most expensive car in the collection is?
We're not going to put the full figure on it, of course, because there's a little bit of sensitivity around that. But we'll say it's in the, call it 3 to 5 million range.
Okay.
That's where we our latest acquisition comes in at, and we purchased a Porsche Carrera GT just probably a couple months ago with about 600 miles on it as well. So that's a car that we believe has enormous potential as being kind of the true last analog super car, depending on how your definition complies. But it's our goal to purchase a Carrera GT with 20,000 miles that we can really, bring out for folks to get to experience who wouldn't get to otherwise.
So it's not just about money. It's not about monetary all in all. It's about experiences, right? I mean, that seems like part of the gist of this.
Yeah, I mean, look, I'm an investment manager first, right? I have a duty, of course, to the investors to maximize our risk-adjusted return. But that doesn't mean that there is an opportunity to still have some fun, right? I think at the end of the day, that's what gets people excited about participating in the fund is getting to own a piece of that experience, not just a piece of the return.
Yeah.
That's awesome, man.
So, one of the things that your website says is that you guys are after blue chip cars, right? Tell everybody how you define a blue chip car, in your mindset, right?
Absolutely. So, we look at it kind of in two schools of thought. There's, of course, kind of the quantitative element. So we have a proprietary data set going back mid-1980s or so, 12,000 plus sales. This is all fully, verifiable data. So this is auction data, public transaction data that we can call up the auction house and confirm that, the transaction actually occurred. So what we look at in that regard is, a screen that filters the cars by really return, volatility, and most importantly, really liquidity. Right. There's a lot of these incredible headlining sales figures. McLaren F1 sells for 20.5 million, or the 250 GTO that sold at RM Sotheby's in November for nearly 52 million. There's not enough volume from a liquidity perspective that you could trade in and out of those cars readily. So our goal was to identify what have been the cars that just empirically have had double-digit returns for the past 20 plus years as a minimum, with enough liquidity that you could feasibly trade in and out of these positions without waiting, years for one to come up to the market. So that's kind of the quantitative side. The qualitative side, we work alongside a number of folks who, live, breathe the automotive industry for, decades longer than I have. So a great group of advisors, Johnny Lieberman, you guys I'm sure know at Motor Trend, Matthias Deltrelou, who was one of the folks that actually the Peninsula Hotels hired in to put on a motorsport gathering, which we now know is the Quail. He's also the chairman of the Swiss Concours d'Elegance. So we have folks kind of in every flavor of the automotive spectrum to be able to provide their guidance on, what are the blue chip collectibles. There are a number of indexes out there as well that, follow these sort of trends. And we anchor to really a few things. Originality, right? You're never going to find a car that can be made original again if it wasn't, or if it was damaged, what have you. Provenance of the cars, right? Of the past, call it 15 highest sales, 12 have been cars with storied, race histories as well.
Oh yeah. Yep.
Rarity, think limited production. We consider limited production to be about 500 or less, in their run. And of course, in all the fun elements we love, which we throw into a bucket that we refer to as enthusiast purity. Naturally aspirated engines, last of a generation powertrain, manual transmissions, all the fun stuff. We have a gated manual R8 V10 that is part of the driver's portfolio. That we really think that if we can provide things that make people smile, no matter the age range, we know that that's a car that people get excited about.
Right.
Yeah. In fact, John and I were just at Barber Motorsports Park in Birmingham, Alabama, for the Indy race this past weekend, and I ran into the communications director who showed me the Ferrari that John Surtees drove, and they're actually taking that car to Goodwood Festival of Speed this year and running it up the hill. And he was talking about how it's already a really special car, but it's adding to the provenance, of that car to say, oh, by the way, it also ran up the hill at the Goodwood Festival of Speed, right? So that was pretty cool. But our both the cars you just mentioned are more modern, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
What else is on your radar as far as something you would like to acquire in the collection? And are you looking at anything that is more like a Lamborghini Miura or a 250 GT or, something along those lines, or like a Diablo or a Countach or something, right?
If there's an answer, D, all of the above. We have a shorter list. It would be like, what cars are we not looking for, right? So there's a lot that's on our radar, and I think kind of the beauty of being, a more disciplined investor is you can be more deal driven than anything.
Right.
We don't, need the specific Miura in our, or I should say the Countach is kind of when I think of the poster, I think of the Countach and, needing it in a specific color or something there. So we can be pretty agnostic when it comes to spec and when it comes to the exact cars coming to market. But we are also looking at a quite a range throughout history. So everything from modern cars, as we've talked about, and the Holy Trinity, and even track only cars, 935s or Schumacher, F1 cars, all the way back to 8.5 liter blower Bentleys and Le Mans blue trains and the whole pre-war American Duesenbergs and Packards and all the stunning really works of art, from 30s through 60s. But yeah, the Miura is certainly one of interest to us as well. Countach as well, Diablo as well. Our goal, currently is to show that we have an eclectic range of vehicles we're looking to curate.
Yeah.
To show that, car collecting and really car enthusiasm is not a one size fits all sort of bucket, right? People love cars of all walks of life, of all backgrounds, and that's what makes them amazing, right?
Yeah.
So I'm not going to say who, but I may or may not know someone who has Michael Schumacher's F1 car from when he drove it in France, right? So may know somebody who has it.
Okay. Well, we'll chat after the recording here.
No, so it's interesting, right? Because you're going to have a set of cars where your investors are going to get to experience them, which is really cool. But you're also going to have a set of cars that you're, from your perspective, or what you were saying is more of the investment side of the house, right? Would you ever, think about maybe as the collection amasses, right? Would you ever think about, just putting those cars on display so that people who could come see those cars?
Absolutely. I mean, I have, dreams that are a little, bigger than I can chew at the moment. But I would love to have some sort of, exactly right. Yeah, I'd love to have some sort of nonprofit, whether it's a museum or other type of concours show that would be ultimately, ideally free to the public, right? To lower those barriers to entry to experiencing these amazing cars, that much further. Right. So having some sort of nonprofit where folks could come by, bring their kids, inspire the next generation of automotive enthusiasts.
Because we really need that. I mean, you look at some of the cars, that have come out and they just have no soul, no personality to them, right? So we need them to see these cars and get excited about them, right? But John and I actually just one of our previous podcasts was around the Savoy Museum in Atlanta.
That's right.
Just north of Atlanta, which is a guy's personal collection. And he basically had it and said, I want to share this with everybody, right? And then he turned it into a museum, and now he has rotating exhibits that come through. So different people will donate their cars for a little while, or they'll get in contact with people and have them send their cars. And Peterson Museum was kind of the same way, right? They started gathering cars, and then they were like, we can't just keep these to ourselves, sort of thing, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Right. No, exactly. And we've developed relationships at the Peterson Museum and at other museums because they're a natural fit for us, right? We want to be able to share these cars. They already have, the facilities and the personnel, to take care of them properly. And, what better place?
Yeah.
Yeah. So what are some of the challenges of the business, I guess, if you don't mind me asking?
No, not at all. I mean, it's a challenge getting any business up and running.
Right.
Least of all, one that's blending two very distinct sort of industries, right? So, we have two sort of camps of folks that we speak with. It's really Wall Street or car enthusiasts, and we get a decent amount of blending between the two, but not necessarily on the institutional side of things. Institutional investors, large capital allocators, pensions, endowments, big asset managers, private banks, they're very risk averse, and they're very new to this space. So I would say it takes quite a bit of education and handholding to help, bring folks, like that into the conversation to say, hold on a second, if your goal is risk aversion, well, let me show you some really interesting data. Because we have third-party data from Credit Suisse Research Institute that suggests that classic cars in particular, have the lowest maximum drawdown on record. So, said in English, if you look at a kind of a line chart of a price graph, if you measured from any given period the peak to the trough, the maximum distance there is that max drawdown. And we've seen very little drawdown compared to other asset classes, really on par in the classic car world with that of a portfolio comprised of global bonds. So it's from a risk perspective and from a downside perspective, we haven't seen, many of these cars fall too much in value today, which gives us, some confidence, because you can't derive intrinsic value from automobiles, whereas you can with stocks, right? You derive the price as the present value of a future stream of earnings. You can't do that. You have to look at comparable sales. So it's our best way of anchoring to that, is to see, well, what has been in vogue and in favor with folks for past couple decades. Let's anchor to those winners.
Yeah,
that's awesome.
And so two things. One, I went to Car Week last year, and I was at the Sotheby's auction, and I saw I don't know if you saw this. I'll have to show everybody, but I saw a frame, like a rusted out frame of a Ferrari that sold for almost $3 million. Right.
Yeah, I know what you're talking about.
Yeah, and so the theory behind it is that if you purchase the car with the VIN number intact, you can send it back to Ferrari, and they'll rebuild you the car.
Exactly. A
buddy of mine just did the same thing with a Porsche. He had a Porsche that he had bought a collection of cars, and it was basically just a rolling frame. He showed me some pictures of it, and it sold on Bring a Trailer for an astronomical amount of money. I was like,
it's
that's
insane.
Awesome, man. So
So the other thing is, over the past let's say 4 years, maybe going on 5 years now, right? We've seen kind of a really weird time in car ownership, car collecting, right? And I think John and I had a couple of these conversations, like the one that got away conversations this weekend, right? Because I was talking to a guy at the Indy race who's got a 2005 Ford GT. And I was like, oh man, I've always wanted one of those cars. They're incredibly impractical because you can't park them in a regular parking spot because the roof, it's got like a soda can for a gas tank. I mean, it's not a very practical car, but it's an amazing car. And I had an opportunity in 2019 to pick one up for like 150 grand. I passed on it. And now you can't get one for under $400,000. Right.
Yep.
And so we're starting to see, where the market trends, even on new cars, they're going over MSRP on some of these, even on basic cars, during COVID, but they're still maintaining over MSRP on cars they think are going to be interesting in the marketplace. Right. So we're seeing 911 GT2 RSs, GT3 RSs require a waiting list, go over MSRP.
Yeah.
And I would say, we'll start with the new question. The new question is, are you concerned that if you're buying a newer model car, right, or a more recent model car, that it's eventually going to hit a peak and then hit a valley?
I think this is a bit of a cop out of an answer, but it completely depends what you're buying.
Yeah.
Well,
I think we're seeing a really interesting shift when it comes to new cars. It's almost like everybody, kind of shifted to the smartphone when it came to telling time. It's probably the most commonly used clock, out there, right, is the iPhone.
Yep.
That's not why somebody buys a Rolex or an Audemars Piguet, right? There is that hand-built analog experience with, phenomenal materials that brings you into a community of like-minded folks. So I think you see sort of a similar thing that, you'll have fully level 5, autonomous vehicles get you from A to B, right? Yeah. Almost similar to horse racing, right? Where we at some point said, no horses, on the interstate. And, we shifted completely to the automobile. Yet the horse racing and breeding industry is massive, right? So I think you likely see a similar thing, and we're such an interesting position, right? Because of the next 12 months, we're going to see all of these new cars that these automakers have, really shifted fully away from the internal combustion engine, at least ICE only.
I mean, even the Porsche Cayman has,
right.
Even the Porsche Cayman is disappearing from what it is currently.
Right.
So that's so crazy to think that new of a car is changing massively.
Completely. I mean, we've seen countless, iconic engines.
Oh yeah.
Really, almost every automaker. There's such, global regulatory pressure on these automakers that, your answer to, do I see the premiums coming down? Not anytime soon. Yeah. Really. I mean, I think they're going to be all the more desirable by folks who love to drive.
Yeah.
So, and I mean, we've been seeing that, right? John and I were having a conversation on the episode that aired live today about trucks. And, there was a battle for a little while, right, on some of these high performance trucks. We saw the Saleen F-150 and the Roush and the the Raptor, and then the T-Rex came out with their truck, and they were all 600-700, almost 800 horsepower in some cases. And it was insane. And now the new TRX is being announced with a twin turbo 6-cylinder motor, and everybody's like, well, what happened? I mean, this is coming from the company that was, we'll put 1,000 horsepower on anything we can do, right?
Right.
So it was
it's really interesting.
crazy.
And the like the F-150 Lightning, right? The Cybertruck. I think if you said to folks 10 years ago, hey, we got some electric pickup trucks and they're going to be sold out, someone's going to be like, what have you been smoking?
Right. Right.
What planet are you on? Exactly.
So Eden, tell me, you're in New York City, right?
Yes.
New York City's not much of a car city.
I know. We have to drive upstate.
Okay.
That's what I have to do. I know I moved here about 2 years ago. So I have some family who live here. Was actually in Utah just prior to that, and San Diego, which is really, I think, the best place to drive in the personal opinion, but in the continental United States. So no, it's really tough. It's really, really tough. The other day I used Turo, the app where you can.
Very familiar with Turo. I use it quite. In fact, I'm going to use it this weekend for the Miami race.
Yeah. And I had the best day though. I mean, I just going out and driving and just getting to get out a little bit of the. I love the city, but it is possibly the worst place to drive.
Yeah. So Eden, tell me if you were, if you had a house out in the country, right, out in upstate New York or what have you, right? Mm-hmm. What would be your dream car? Your getaway car that you're going to take out, bomb through the mountains, that sort of thing.
Yeah, it have to be an F12 Tour de France. I mean, it's pretty hard to beat when it comes
He's got expensive taste.
Noise handling. I know that's the only issue, right? Yeah, but you said dream car. You didn't say budgeted dream car.
Didn't say budgeted dream car. You're right. You got me. No, that F12 is probably one of the most iconic sounding engines. It's an absolutely incredible drive. They had an F12 at the it was the F12. I think it was the TDF at the race this weekend, and I was telling John, I was like, that's $1 million car.
Yeah. At least now. Yeah. It's amazing what what they've done. But I'm a sucker for a V12 Grand Tourer. It's such a kind of juxtaposition of extreme smooth power in a long haul road trip type of package. Doesn't get much better.
Yeah, I might know somebody on this podcast who has a V12 Grand Tourer.
Yeah. So one of my cars is the Aston Martin DB11 AMR with the signature Halo pack. So
a lot of I'm sure your listeners know, but a lot of people don't understand that the AMR, that's like AMG. That's how I would compare that. You're looking at a C class or a C63 AMG. Like that is how I would look at AMR when it comes to DB11. Like it's that much of a.
So being that y'all invest in cars and stuff, I'm just curious what your thoughts are on future value of this car. So it's one of 74 worldwide, one of 31 in the U.S., and the previous owner was Carroll Shelby's grandson.
Oh, no kidding.
Yeah,
that's pretty fun. So how'd you come into that car?
So actually, I had a Z06, brand new Z06, and I wanted something a little more rare, a little more cool, a little more different, and so I started looking, and me and Adam had been bouncing cars back and forth for a while, and I was like, I think I'm gonna go with this one, and so I sent it to him, and I was like, what do you think? And it was a 3,000-mile car. It was V12, it was twin turbo, it was AMR, it was the Halo pack, it was signature edition, it was everything, and I was like, this is the car, like it's got to be. And so I think in future value, I'm not going to lose money. At least Aston Martins, they take a good hit, but this one took a pretty big hit. So I think I'm in the safe zone, if you will.
Yeah, no, I mean, I in terms of my opinion on the car, Aston Martins have been pressured. They haven't seen the same levels of appreciation as you have seen in Porsche and Ferrari and Bugatti.
Right.
But for every growth stock, there's a value stock, right?
Yeah.
In a way, I think you can make a real argument to say, hold on a second, Aston Martin is a real racing team. Let's give this real thought here, because a lot of that technology flows down, especially AMR products, into their production cars. So, I would say that's, I don't know what you bought it for, but I would say that that's a great package to make a recipe for appreciation is how I would kind of frame it.
Yeah, that's kind of how I looked at it. Now I am driving it, enjoying it, and anytime you put a bunch of miles on something, it's going to depreciate some. I'm okay with it though. I'm like, worst case, I've got my money tied up in this car, and if it loses all its money, it's an awesome car. So that's how.
Completely. That's because I get those questions, a bit, right? And I first and foremost tell everyone point blank, buy the car you love. Don't do it.
That's right.
The is, I mean, yes, you should not be financially reckless, of course. But
I mean,
you know,
maybe it'd be okay, depending on the car. Depending on the car.
There you go. You know, but when it comes to, you know, oh, Eden, should I, you know, invest in Drift Capital's fund, or should I buy, you know, a car? But what are you talking about? Buy the car, right? You know, this isn't where, you know, our offering slots in. Our offering slots in when you take a look at your portfolio with your wealth advisor, and you know, you see your kind of 60-40 split, and you say, okay, how do I diversify and seek out some uncorrelated sources of return? Look to Drift Capital. That's
awesome.
our angle.
Yeah, I like that.
Fantastic.
That's awesome, man.
Well, Eden, thank you so much for joining us today. It's been absolutely awesome. Like I said, I was very excited when I came across the information about Drift and everything, and I really was happy that you were able to connect with us today. So, thank you so much for joining.
Yeah, we really appreciate it, man.
Thank you for taking the time.
Yeah, and thanks everybody for listening. Like, share, and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next podcast.
See y'all.